Layers are a great part of the functionality of Flash. Again, if you've used other Adobe products, layers really shouldn't be a difficult concept for you to understand. Our layers panel, or excuse me, our timeline panel is what's going to control our layers. We can create new layers just by pressing on this little icon at the bottom. You see when I put my cursor over it, it says new layer. I click a new layer and it creates a new layer. I've actually been playing with this file for a while, so it's not creating layer 2, but layer 17. Let's put something on each of these layers so we can see the basic premise of layers. And I'm going to just create an object that's not quite so ridiculous looking. So here is a rectangle on layer 1, and then I'll click on, you see how we have these little cells. I'm going to click into this first frame on layer 17. It's highlighted now, and now I'll click and draw a different object. Actually, and it doesn't matter that it's on a different layer because it's on a different layer. Holding Shift constrained to get a perfect circle. And now these objects are on different layers. So the way this works is, of course, the layers above are going to obscure the layers below. So my circle is on layer 17. The rectangle is on layer 1. If I move these layers, the appearance of the document is going to change accordingly. If I move layer 17 below layer 1, the gray rectangle is going to obscure the green circle. Right now the green circle obscures because it is on layer 17, it is above. So if I click and drag, I've now moved layer 17 below layer 1, and now you can see how it affects the document visually. The rectangle is now above the circle. We can name our layers, which would make it a little bit more appropriate in this case. I'll name layer 17 according to what it actually has on it. So it's a circle. And layer 1, and I'm just simply double clicking on the name of the layer. Layer 1 is going to be rectangle. Alright, let's look at some of these buttons over here. This here is just the visibility of the layer. We can toggle the visibility, so I can click on the visibility of the rectangle layer. If I click on that, you can see that the rectangle's gone. It appears to be gone, it's just simply hidden. That layer is hidden. If I click on that same spot again, the red X goes away, I get a white dot, and back comes the rectangle. Let's say I don't want to manipulate anything on the rectangle layer again. This right here locks the layers. So our Flash files can get really complicated, and one of the tools that we can use to simplify how we're working with a file and make it to where we can't select things that we don't want to select is just to simply lock a layer, or not change things that we don't want to change. We just simply lock a layer. So I've clicked lock on that layer, and now you can see that, doesn't matter how much I try, I can't select this object. I can't move it. Okay, I can still select the circle and move the circle and other things about the circle, but I can't select that rectangle. That rectangle is a done deal. Okay. Now if I unlock it, then I'll of course be able to move the rectangle again. So just that simple. It's manipulatable. I can move everything around, do whatever I like. Okay, now another thing that we may run into is we may get really complicated drawings going on. And in these events, we may want to actually simplify things by just looking at the outlines. Now we can do that. We can actually click on this icon, and let's do this on the circle layer. If I click on this icon on the circle layer, you can see that the circle just goes to outlines. Oop, double clicked it. Didn't mean to get there yet. So that can simplify our drawings as well. Let's look at some of the other functionality of our layers. And we have what are called folders, and of course we have the trash can to delete with. So if I create a new layer, I don't really want that layer, I just simply click and drag the layer. Oh, you can't drag in Flash, you just have to click delete. In other Adobe programs you can actually drag to the trash, but it's not letting us do that in Flash. Now, if we want to organize things, like let's say we have a number of other layers. We want to organize our file, and this actually will happen quite a bit. You'll see as time goes on in the semester. I can create a folder, and I can name the folder. I'll call it empty layers, because that's all it's going to be right now. And then I can select. I'm holding Shift on the keyboard, so I can select multiple layers and click and drag them into that folder. They're now, see how they're indented, they're nested, and you see how it has a little arrow icon? I can actually click that and collapse that folder. So that contains those other layers now. So I can organize and keep my composition very clean and orderly. Now let's look at the types of layers. One of the types of layers that I want you guys to be aware of is what's called a guide layer. We'll use that one first. I really like guide layers. I'm going to move that layer to the bottom. I'm going to call it the guide layer. Now, we have rulers in Flash, and rulers, we can pull guides from rulers to put some sort of guide on the screen. And of course, I now have somehow frozen up my computer. It's coming back. But one of the things I find about rulers is that they're very imprecise. And so I actually like to use guide layers as opposed to rulers. And I don't know why. Okay, I don't want to import anything. Thank you. Let's look. View is what I want. View rulers. There we go. That's what. So I can click and drag these out on the screen, but I find them very difficult to actually place where I want them to. And then of course it doesn't show us anything. We don't get a measurement. So it's basically like you kind of hope that you got them in the right place, but you're never really sure. Now, what I like to do is I like to actually use what's called a guide layer to put down guides for my project. So I'm going to double click on the icon for this layer, and I get the layer properties. Now, you can see we have a number of different types of layers. Mask and masked, you're going to go through in the book. You can actually have one layer that acts as a window for other layers, so only portions of the layers will show. And then, of course, I showed you a folder and then guide layer. That's what I want this to be. And I want to show you what this looks like. You see how the icon has changed now? It's to one of those little T-square things that you see that engineers use. Now, I'm going to create some lines, and I'm going to show you. This is really wonderful. I love this. Now, with creating a guide layer and working with lines, we're going to have so much more control. You see what happens here in the properties panel when I select that line? I get the position and size of the line. So it's actually telling me the X location, the Y location, the width, and the height. So the X location, it starts off of the stage over here. The Y location, it's 28 down from the top, and then it's 619.95 wide, and then of course just the one pixel high. What I want to do is I'm going to actually manipulate these layers. We can actually click right in them, and you see it actually moved it on the stage, so that my 0 position for X is now, or my X position for this line is precisely at 0, and let's say I want it to be 20 on the Y. Oop, there we go. I think I had another rendering issue there. I thought it tried to give me 2 lines for a second. And now it's 20 pixels precisely from the top, which is really nice. I can also, let me look at the stage size. My stage is 550 pixels by 400 pixels. So now I know how wide this line needs to be precisely the width of the stage. So I'm going to go back to this object, select it, tell it I want it to be 550 pixels. And there we go. It's very precise. Now I could do this for all my other guides now. I'm going to show you a little trick here. I'm going to hold Shift and Alt. Shift is, of course, going to constrain my movement. Alt is going to, watch what happens when I press Alt to the icon. See how the icon, what happens here is that it's making a copy of that line. But what I can do now is, my stage is 400, I believe. I can put this at 380. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create guides that are going to delineate 20 pixels from the edge of the document, so that when I'm designing with other layers, I know that is actually precisely 20 pixels from the edge of the document, so I can keep things away from that. And now I'm going to create another line, and I'll try to make it fairly exact, but it likely will not be. Oh, you know what? I'm going to go to object drawing mode is what I'm going to do. So, grab my line, object drawing mode. There you go. Click, drag. Okay. And I'm going to put it at 20x, 20 pixels from the edge. I'm going to start it at 0y, right at the top. I'm having a rendering issue, so hopefully that's not bugging you guys too much. My width can be 1. My, okay, that's fine. And then my height can be 380. And enter, and oh, it shouldn't be 380, it should be 400. There we go. And let me just plus, minus, there we go. So that, oops, other line goes away. This little trick I'm doing right here, just so you know, I try to point these out when I do this. And please do ask me, because I have a problem with muscle memory. I just do things and forget to tell people that I'm doing them, because I don't even realize I'm doing them. Right now I'm holding the space bar, which turns my icon into my tool into the hand tool, and then if I click and drag, it just moves the entire stage. Okay, now the last thing I do is move that. Whoop, I'm holding Shift and Alt. I do get a second one there, and I'm going to make the X position 530. Plus minus. Whoop, minus. Come on. There we go. Cooperate with me. And there you can see I now have guides that are 20 pixels from the edge on all directions. Now the cool thing here now is if I go to work on another layer, let's work on layer 22, my guide, my tools will actually snap to those lines. So I can use them to guide me. I can create objects that are precisely on that. And then of course the really cool thing is here, I'm going to test this, and because it's a guide layer, it will not be visible when I export my project. So I'm going to press Control Enter on the keyboard. That's going to test the project, test the movie actually. And you can see my layers, my rectangle, my circle layers that were invisible are there. My oval that I created is there, but the guides are not. The guides are essentially non-visible layers when we export later, when we publish. Like I said, you'll learn a little bit more about masking later, but that was the basics of the timeline and, of layers, different types of layers and how to use them.